Welcome, everybody. We'll just give a moment for people to get into the room, find their seats. Tried and true Zoom joke. Hope everybody's having a good day today. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are from, or time zone you are in. If you want to take a hot moment and introduce yourself in the chat, that's a great way to get things rolling. Who you are and where you're calling from, your organization, things like that. And we'll get started in another minute. So I want to make sure that we have critical mass in our room today. Ooh, yes, I always love seeing that. Aloha from Maui United Way. Oh, Montana representing Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Oh, Wenatchee, we're just talking about Ellensburg. This picture in my background is from a farm I used to work at in Ellensburg, which is close to Wenatchee area, California. Tacoma. Oh, those are my people. I'm from Washington State. All right, Colorado. Ah, got somebody grew up in Ellensburg. Eberg, as it's so lovingly called. Right. Got a lot of people here today. Really excited. So I am going to kick us off and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. We are in for a really engaging presentation and workshop led by Bob Gradick with the University of Pittsburgh and Erica Gilliam with Drexel, who are co-mentors. And we are going to be talking on the topic of engaging community members with data. And yes, great. Everybody's introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you. So we will start off with some friendly reminders, as we always do in these cross-cohort workshops. And then we'll lead into the actual workshop, the content, and we have some activities in breakout rooms today. And then we'll wrap up with upcoming events and announcements. Next slide. If at any time you need help along the way, please shoot Susan Martinez a DM if you need some help, or you can private chat her or raise your hand, however you need to find her. She's on point for that. And next slide, friendly reminder. We are your DASH program office, your Anna Barnes, myself, Miriam Castro, and Susan Martinez. And as you can see there on the slide, we're here to help navigate questions around contracts and program expectations. And we administer evaluation data and help curate feedback on the program. And your primary point of contact, as you probably know by now, is Susan Martinez. So there's her email. You can reach out to her at any time. She's available and extremely helpful. And next slide. And this is this year's cohorts and mentee cohorts. So this is just in case you meet somebody today from one of these organizations, you know how to follow up. We're really big on inspiring peer-to-peer connections. And so this slide is available for you at any time. And if you need help finding somebody, your point person is Susan. She can help you with that, or your mentors. All right, so next slide. So just a high-level reminder and purpose of our cross-cohort learnings is our target audience is mentees and their partners, and anyone within that realm that you think would benefit from these learnings that will help increase the momentum on your project. The goals are to discuss and share content with peers, introduce mentees and partners to common topics across data sharing, and benefit from the expertise of other mentors, and also to get some updates and friendly reminders from the PO. So just some follow-up ideas after today's webinar. Talk about it afterwards. Check in with your mentor and then also your fellow cohort mates. And it's just a great opportunity to unpack shared resources and ideas as a team. And as a reminder, next slide, All In Data for Community Health is a resource where data enthusiasts like you can come together and share best practices, resources, and ideas to advance data sharing and multi-sector collaboration. This is just a kind of a snapshot picture of available offerings through All In. And the next slide, big, huge news today. Accountable Communities of Health is a brand new affinity group launching today. I know many of you on the call are involved in affinity groups, so this is a new one. With those interested in exploring the Accountable for Communities for Health model, and we're going to drop the link to register in the chat if you're interested. The whole point of this this particular group is by the end of 4 meetings, you will have everything you need to create an accountable community health in your community. And next slide. Another friendly reminder that All In online community is available, that each mentorship cohort has space in the online community where today's recordings and notes and resources will be shared along with other resources pertaining to your specific cohort. And without further ado, I am going to turn the time over to Bob and Erica to launch into their presentation. Thanks.
Okay, just getting the slides pulled up here. And give me a minute. So we're going to work today on, let me start my presentation here. So I'm here with Erica. We are mentors from Pennsylvania. And it's really nice to see so many of our cohort here. Oh, clicked the wrong thing, sorry. There we go. And so we're going to just go over some different resources and activities and hopefully give you a chance to work with each other too on list building activities and kind of discussing some questions that you can be asking. So it'll be pretty interactive today. So we're going to really ask that you minimize outside distractions. I know that's tough, but you know, I think especially once we get into the meat of the activities today, you'll be talking to each other and kind of doing a lot of thinking as opposed to just a lot of just sitting back and watching. So I'm really glad to be working with Erica this year on the mentorship. And I don't know if all of you have met Erica, but she's great. She's over at Drexel, 5 hours away, the other side of the state. So with that, I wanted to just use the chat again to see what your energy level is like. And so rather than on a scale of 1 to 5, would like to know what animal best captures your energy level today and why. And so you can just throw that in the chat. We just want to see kind of how you're feeling right now and just get your temperature. These should be good, hopefully. See some tigers, some dogs. I know I'd see a sloth. Inchworm's a good one. No blobfishes yet, though. Lots of cats, lots of cat energy. I don't know, Erica, have you thought about this one?
Yeah, I was feeling very slothy this morning, but I'm kind of feeling the turtle vibes now. We're slow but steady. Yeah.
Yeah, last week I was definitely like a sloth after vacation, but yeah, now I'm feeling like a little more slow and steady. So yeah, turtle works.
Yeah. I was feeling slothy now, just this long commute into the office.
Oh yeah. Good luck. So with that, we'll move ahead. So throw your last oh, we got another Woodle dog. Nice. So throw your energy level in there, even though we're moving on. Love to see it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with some questions that kind of pulled from lots of different really good resources. There have been like so many good things popping up online that are worth a read and a look and in the last few years, and pulled a lot of content from these. And I think what I want to do is share these questions with you. So really 4 sets of questions that you should really ask yourself before you do anything, any kind of intensive engagement with data. And the first set is around background and history. And once we get through these, you're going to have these at your disposal because we're going to do a breakout room activity around these. in a few minutes. So just some of the questions you want to ask yourself about background and history of both yourself and the communities in which you work. You know, questions about your biases and how can you recognize them. Ask yourself questions about how members of the community that you're working with define that community. Is it, you know, set by certain boundaries, whether they're geographic or based on race or ethnicity or lived experience? So what defines that community? What are the contexts at work in that community? What are the dynamics that you need to be aware of? Has discrimination and racism touched that community in what ways? And how does that impact people today? And that map I had up earlier was from some of the redlining maps. So just like getting a sense of what those kind of things that happen back in the past, how does that impact your work today? And think about your institution. Both Erica and I work at big universities, and there are really complicated relationships with communities. So, you know, do you inherit those relationships in your work? And so those are all questions that you want to ask yourself before you really get going, because that'll help inform your work. The second set, I was like waiting for somebody to advance the slides, and I'm like, wait, that's me. Second set of questions to ask yourself is all about power. And, you know, like who has a relationship, the power relationships in the community? When you come into a community, you know, what kind of capacity do they have to participate as a partner? Sorry, there's like so many pop-ups on my screen. I have to move these things. Okay. So what kind of ramifications come from your presence in the community? Are you taking things over that other people in the community would otherwise be doing? Are you going to be disempowering people? Are you going to disrupt dynamics? And so having a sense of what might happen when you go in before you go in is another thing to think about. And then who owns the project? Who's responsible for making decisions about it? Who should be making decisions about it? And how's this work going to be maintained and continued? Third set of questions is all about trust. And, you know, trust falls are one thing, but I think you can go beyond those things. And so like, what are some of the expectations in the community about your work? What do they want from you? What if you don't live up to those expectations? How can you manage those expectations? And how are you going to define those relationships? Is the community going to be incurring costs in working with you, whether it's in terms of time or missed opportunities and things like that? How are you going to benefit? How will you and your institution benefit from that work? And how will the community benefit? You know, are those benefits going to be shared equally? Or are they going to be seen as more extractive? How are you going to make sure that your work reflects the needs and the interests of the community, however it's defined? How are you going to engage the community? What tactics and techniques are going to use? We'll highlight some of the ones that we really like to use in our work in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. How long are you going to be in the community? Is it a long-term relationship? How are you going to sustain those relationships? Communicate with everybody that you're going to be working with. And then the final set is questions about data. And I think like thinking about the data that you're going to be working with is also an important thing. You know, how are members of the community that you're working with represented in the data? How do they feel about that? Are there biases in the data that's there? How should you be thinking about minimizing the risks and harms in collecting, holding, using, and sharing data? Do you understand sensitivities in the context of that community when it comes to data? Who's going to have access to the data that you're going to be working with? How's that all going to be governed, and what are the relationships look like around that? Has there been consent from community? What do they feel about you using data about them? And then what's the role of the community in interpreting and analyzing the data? And are they ready for that role? So this takes us to our first activity. And a lot of the resources that I pulled those questions from are those that are listed here. And I have links to these at the very end of the slides. So those are going to be there for you. But the first activity, we're going to break you into breakout groups. And I hope many of you are familiar with the Zoom breakout features. But we want you to take a look at the questions to ask yourself before engaging the community with data. And I don't know, can somebody throw the link to the companion Google Doc into the chat before we get started, and I can introduce that. So in your group of like 3 to 4 people, just talk through the questions with each other. You might only pick 1 or 2 of those groups. what do you think about them? Are there questions that you think are missing? Do you want to add comments to any of the questions that are there, whether they're generated by the, the people in the call or just that are there from us? And like I said, just you may not only have time to focus on one or two, but just really get into a good conversation about those. Is the Google link in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, so I will pull that up on my screen. Hang on a second. Just have to exit these. So this is what you're going to see. So at the very top, you're just going to see the activity and just the instructions that I had up on the screen are repeated there. And then each of those 4 questions. So the ones that I have highlighted are just the ones that are from the slides. So if you see things that are missing, just add them in bullet points. And go ahead and add comments to any of the questions that you see too. So we'll go ahead and throw you into the breakout rooms, give you about 12 or so minutes, maybe a little more, depending on how things go. We might be able to do more than that. So look for your invitation. And if you have any trouble, just raise your hand, send us a chat message, or just jump out of your room for a bit and we'll take care of it. Sound good?
Enjoy, everyone. Yeah. We'll just wait for a couple more people to come back out from the breakout rooms. I hope everyone had a great conversation. Okay, Bob, everyone should be back.
Everybody back? Okay. So maybe if we do our hand raise in the, I think under the participants tab, is that right? I forget where you can do the hand raise and
Yeah.
or even in the chat. Just want to hear what you thought about the questions. I saw some definitely some of the groups are adding to those, but just wanted to see what that experience was like. And you can, if you can raise your hand in the chat or in wherever that happens, feel free. We'll just call on you if we can do that.
Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar with like the control panel, so if you want to go to the bottom of your screen, click on reactions, you'll see a raised hand motion there.
Oh yeah, I thought it was
I see.
under participants before. I think they.
It's a little different with meetings versus webinars. I think that's why.
Oh, okay. It was like in the wrong place. Oh, we have a hand.
Yeah, I'll say so. I thought our conversation was really great. We talked about kind of 2 things that really stuck out to me about moving at the pace of trust and understanding that community involvement requires that trust and may move slower than we want it to, and our timelines that we make as professionals. And how do we bring that feedback of whatever they provide to us, how do we get back to them and know that their input is important and we acknowledge their time and commitment that they've provided us. And then we also talked a lot about power and background and history. I think they kind of go back and forth about the power struggles of urban versus rural, and a lot of times how urban areas, even in a rural area where I'm at, where our urban area is really not urban, we're still very rural, but we still tend to get, feedback only from the Wenatchee area because that's our most populated area. And we can often create these silos and power struggles because we're so geographically diverse and have mountain passes between each other or large valleys between each other. So I think we talked a lot about the kind of urban and rural and the power struggles within our own communities we can create. Yeah.
That's great. So we have time for 1 or so more, but you can also throw reactions into chat too. We'd love to see what you thought about that.
I can read out loud Lorraine's since she's having microphone
Okay.
issues. She shared, good conversation, recognize that we all have biases, but we can do something about it by being aware. Requires us to listen and be aware.
That sounds good. Yeah, definitely. Just recognizing them is the first step. I'm going to pull the slides back up, but anybody else wants to chime in while I figure out how to do all of this, just feel free.
I'll chime in real fast while you're doing that. We had some really good conversations about finding trust leaders in the community to help us navigate as well. And one of the things that we discussed, or I discussed, was also having some basic core principles that go along with your program and your project from start to finish, no matter what that project or direction it goes in. Also kind of gives that transparency of, this is how we're actually going to use that data no matter what the iteration of the project looks like, no matter who gets involved, that you will always kind of abide by as a way that we have tried to build some of that trust. And our community being, not necessarily as big as of a melting pot as others, but it's still pretty fresh with colonialism and things like that. But then also learning that even within these pockets, there's such different diversity and melting pots and completely different individuals that you're dealing with, that you really have to be quick to distinguish those to figure out what the best approach is, because obviously there's definitely no one size fits all in these instances.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I think it's really important to think about what your values are and maybe establish those up front in your collaborations. Just kind of get those documented. So you can throw more into the chat, more observations, and you can even, while this is going on or even afterwards, if you wanted to add any additional questions that you come up with or comment on any of the other questions, just feel free to go ahead and do that. That link is there for you to use as a resource. So next time you want to kind of jump into a project, you could have those questions there at your disposal. So I'm going to jump into some slides now that are really just designed not to tell you how to do everything in the next 10 minutes, but really just to point you to a lot of really great resources that are out there. So as you think about your project design, maybe after you've made it through some of the questions that we laid out there, maybe the next step is to do some of these things. And so, thinking about actually describing how you hope to make change happen through a logic model. It's a pain to do these, but I think the more that you do them and the more it becomes a practice of like, how am I actually going to get to the outcomes and the impacts from where we are today, it can be a really good activity and an exercise for a coalition of people working on data activities, especially. And so there's one that's linked at the bottom from the key community practice that both Eric and I are part of at the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership. There was a project through NIH a few years ago in Detroit where they really did a lot of work into what a logic model looks like for community data projects. And so, especially around health. And so this is a really nice example that you can kind of build on. So I wanted to share that with you. In a lot of the work that we do in Pittsburgh, we've been talking about like this ladder of civic participation that's been around since before I was born. So Sherry Arnstein, it's really thinking about how do you climb toward sharing power with communities as opposed to just informing or checking a box that you met with communities in a meeting. So really, I think like what I would challenge everybody here with is, especially if you are in a government organization, or thinking about where you have power, like how do you share that power in your work? And one resource that I found really valuable, especially chapter 2 of a book called Design Justice that came out last year. It's available online for free through some of the open sharing that they have. It's a really helpful thing to read. So just a quote that I have here, it's design justice requires full inclusion of accountability to and ultimately control by people with direct lived experience of the conditions the design team is trying to change. Not only is community leadership ethical, but also the tacit and experiential knowledge of community members is sure to produce ideas, approaches, and innovations that no one else would be able to create. So it's a really nice kind of way to think about how to incorporate people in the work that you do, and also how do you think about ownership of the work and making sure that there is community ownership over this work. And so I found this like really helpful just to read this, and I think you all will too, especially like if you only have time to read a little bit of it. Chapter 2 is the one that I think I found the most value from. And then many of you seen this and probably been on some of the webinars, you know, those data questions that came up. A lot of great solutions are in Amy Hahn Nelson, and a number of authors worked on this at AASP, have done webinars here, centering racial equity throughout data integration. There's lots of great ideas for adopting positive practices for centering racial equity all across the data lifecycle. Definitely check that out. Look at some of the recordings of some of the webinars too. Data literacy came up. I noticed in some of the questions people were saying, how do we build the capacity of communities to use data? And another really nice set of journal articles around data literacy came out a couple of years ago. You know, their link is here on the slides, but had a really good working definition. So it's the ability to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data as part of a larger inquiry process. So data literacy in our mind is not really like, how do I use this website to do a certain thing? It's how do I really think critically about data? How do I ask questions about data as part of the work that we do? And so you could build community data literacy. I have a link to some of the stuff that we did in Pittsburgh around our data 101 activities in our toolkit, inspired by a lot of work out of Boston. So you can see like we've taken things and just really done a lot of paper-based work to try to level the playing field in different communities. So it's not just you have to know computers to be able to think critically about data, which isn't the case. But you can also build your own data literacy. And there's a really nice guide that came out a couple of months ago from the Urban Institute. It's the Do No Harm guide about how to think about equity and include empathy in your data visualization work. And so lots of really good examples of how to do better when it comes to representing people and their identities in data. So I encourage you to check that out too. Also good, build in feedback wherever you can, even if it's not great feedback. This is probably one of my favorite memes on the internet right now. But just think about, as you design your projects, think about where can I capture feedback from people? How do I build that into the project? Because being able to adapt and grow from that feedback is going to make your work a lot better. And then, you know, when you think about community ownership, you also think about accountability. But how are you going to share information about the work that you're doing with people that might have a co-ownership stake in your work? So you might want to think about performance management systems. And so there's a really nice report that came out of NNIP a few years ago around performance management frameworks for data projects. And so I'd encourage you to check that out too. So it starts with the goals, goes through strategy, implementation, and then just like monitoring it. So better to think about that at the outset than to wait until you've actually launched the project and run with it for a while. And there's that workbook is really nice. And so before we get into just some examples, one of the quotes that I really like is by one of the authors that's done a lot of work with data literacy, Rahul Bhargava from Boston. And he and some of his partners have talked about like data as a campfire, and kind of changed my thinking about it a little bit. So it's bringing data to conversations where people are already talking and meeting. And so if you think about data in that way, it can be really helpful. And so for a project that we're doing now with affordable housing, we wanted to just like figure out exactly where people are talking. And so took the approach that we've taken with some of our work around ecosystem mapping and just kind of mapped out who was on the email invites, which organizations were on the email invites for the different meetings that were out there related to housing, whether it's displacement or housing preservation or development, and just kind of wanted to see who's there. Who do we need to reach? Were there people that were at multiple tables? Were there people that weren't at any tables that we could see? And so we were able to identify 5 or 6 tables that we could visit and just say, you know, hey, can we use this campfire as a way to talk about this project and come back and collect feedback on how we're doing? And so it was a really nice activity to do that. in our work, and it just really helped us to understand more about the ecosystem that we were working in. But it might be easier to visit campfires. In some cases, you might want to build your own campfire. We're going to get into some just different engagement techniques, and hopefully these are just inspiration for you. One model that we've worked with a lot is just the learning circle model. Work that we've done in Pittsburgh with the Black Equity Coalition has been all about just bringing data to conversations about health equity and COVID, especially. A group of epidemiologists, Black community leaders, data intermediaries, public health and healthcare professionals have just come together. We meet twice a week. There's a meeting going on right now where we just look at the latest data. We talk about what data we'd like to have to answer questions. We build data visualizations together. We co-create a lot of this. So it's been really great to have this model of just like, we just get together and we talk about data and we set the agenda as we go. And so that's one model that you can use. One that I shared with a lot of the mentees in our cohort was, an activity around soliciting use cases for data, just a basic Google form template we shared. And once we learned that Pennsylvania wasn't really incorporating community feedback into their initial vaccine dashboards, we wanted to share information pretty rapidly with them and say, like, here are some use cases that you can build this around. So just asked people that we knew to fill in this template and shared it with the state. And then they started to understand a little bit more about the demand for the data that they had on vaccinations. So you could do this kind of thing. Our library, Carnegie Library, had a really nice workshop with kids, and they created data zines. Just gave them data, worked with them, and just enabled kids to have conversations about data with each other as they created their own zines. And then just, you can do tabling activities to engage people. This is one we did at a library workshop. It was really designed to just engage people in a conversation, just get them to stop long enough to have fun, that we could talk to them about what was happening in their community. And what we did is we wanted to emphasize the concept of seasonality and build data literacy. And so we took 311 requests for service data from the city and just mapped it out by month in a bar chart, and took the titles off the charts and just asked people to place the right title on the right chart. And they had to really think about when things were happening at certain times of year. Like, when is pothole season? What does that look like on a chart compared to snow and ice removal? And so it was a really nice way to just get people to stop, talk about data, have fun. And so your tabling activities could be just like really basic things, but just engaging people with data, getting them to stop long enough to have a conversation with you is a great goal. And I'm going to turn it over to Erica for a lot of the activities that she's been working with too, that she can share.
Yeah, so like Bob was saying with tabling, to get people to stop long enough to look at your data and have conversations about it. Some of the things that we've done is hosting data carnivals, where we have interactive games at the tables where they might have a question, and we ask the community, what do you think? Ask them a question. We say, what do you think the data looks like? And then they can like fill jars to show how much something is. And it's an easy way to get people to start thinking about data without feeling overwhelmed by it. And then that has made it really accessible even to kids. So actually this picture is a picture of my son playing one of our data games.
Nice. I'd work my kids into this
I'm
stuff.
like trying to advance, so I realized.
Oh, that's me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it either.
Yeah. So another thing that you can try is data sculptures. And I thought this was a pretty cool idea, in that you have people, you just give them a bunch of craft materials and allow them to create a 3D version of data, similar to what Bob was talking about with his, I forgot what was the slide earlier, where you had them build their own graphs with different crafts. Next. And then another thing that we use in particular is community forums, where it's an informal bringing community members together to talk about data that is collected in their community. One of the things specifically in Drexel is that there has been a long history of distrust in the community surrounding Drexel. And so this was our way to bring the data to the community and start having discussions about it. And then a more formal way to maybe have discussions about data is data walk. So Urban has put together quite a few resources on how to conduct a data walk, where you're actually using community members, specifically those that have lived experience, to be like co-experts in developing like a needs assessment. And so I did put the link in there for that resource.
And I think there might be a workshop by partners up in Milwaukee at the All In this year too about data walks. I think I
Oh,
remember seeing
wow.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Where am I here? Okay. And so with that, we're going to get to the last activity, and I'm going to throw the link into the chat. And we don't have time to do a breakout room, but I think what we can do is just kind of all work independently and build a list. So at the bottom, I don't know, Erica, do you want to
Yeah.
let me describe this one?
Actually, my computer is yelling that my battery is low, but I'm gonna.
Oh, I could.
Okay.
If you want to get
yeah.
a charger, I can do that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna run it. I'll be right back.
Okay. So, we want to see more about the practices that you use to make your activities and events more inclusive, equitable, accessible, and valuable. So in that Google Doc that we were using earlier as part of the breakout conversations, there's just another place to sort of list some practices that you use, or you might have been in meetings where it's been used to address these issues. So being more inclusive, making people feel that their voice matters and they have an impact on the goals and the outcomes of the meeting. You know, thinking about making your meetings more equitable, where people at every level, no matter what level of power they have, feel like they can be heard and be engaged meaningfully, and that the people in power don't have the loudest voices. You can make your meetings more accessible, whether that's by offering childcare or thinking about technology and virtual meetings. You know, how have you been able to do that? And then, to make your work more valuable, making what have you done to make sure that people feel like their time's been well spent? That could be everything from like co-creating an agenda to other things. But what we want you to do now, and a lot of this is like pulled from Aspiration, which is an organization out in California. They have a really nice blog post linked here. It's worth reading if you do any kind of virtual events. But jump into the Google Doc now and start to list out some practices that you've seen. We just want to build a list that you can go back and reference if you need, to design a meeting or design an event or activity. Because I think so many of you have done so many wonderful things, and we want to be able to capture that in some way. So just with that, just jump down. We'll give you a few minutes and we'll go into the wrap up. And if anybody has any questions, you could just reach out right now, I guess. And don't worry if anything's duplicated. It could fit under multiple categories. That's okay. You don't have to worry about any of that. We can clean it up. Get your charger, Erica.
Yeah, I didn't have a portable charger, so I had to move the whole computer and myself to a new room.
Yeah, we're gonna give everybody 5 minutes and we'll do the wrap up. So hopefully everybody's okay. I'm gonna steal a lot of these ideas too.
Yeah, these are great ideas.
There's a lot of good stuff in here. And just so you know, I put the link to the slides at the very top of this Google Doc that you're all working in. So the links for all of the resources that we pointed out should be in those slides, either is at the bottom of the slides or in the last couple of slides. I just dumped some things in there too. I think we're getting a delivery here.
Thanks so much, Bob and Erica, for leading this workshop for us. We're definitely very appreciative of it. As people continue to wrap up their thoughts in the Google Doc, I'm going to launch a quick exit survey poll that we like to do, just to give us anonymous feedback on how this session felt for you all. So if you could take that as exit, we also have a couple of quick announcements, but yeah, wanted to make sure we had some time for this.
That's good.
Great. Yeah, so these announcements very quickly won't take too long. And if you have any questions for Bob and Erica, we encourage you to drop them into the chat box or reach out to us as well, and we can make sure that your questions are answered. Thanks again so much for joining us. We're really excited to keep this series going. Just a couple of updates and reminders. The program dates are, we run into end of this, not end of December, but December 1st is the end of the mentorship program. And so there's enough time to start thinking about what next steps you'd like to take as well. Again, we really encourage you to take some time after this webinar to check in with your mentor to see if there's anything that you would like to make actionable from this as well. Wanted to also plug that if you'd like a deeper dive on the mentorship program while we're still around, please let me know. We are happy to give like a quote unquote reorientation if you would like as well. We sent out the Dash Mentee Midpoint Survey earlier this month. Thank you so much to everyone who's completed it. If you haven't done so, please do so as soon as possible. That feedback is really important for us. We have some upcoming programming. Dash scholarships are still available for the CIE Summit. And Bob mentioned that at the All-In National Conference, there would be some sessions related to data walks and other ways of community engagement. Yes, that will be a part of the pre-conference sessions on November 4th. So we'll send out the links to register and to check out the agenda as well. But definitely a great way to follow up on this session. And then we'll see you at our next Cross-Cohort webinars. We have 2 more left, the last 2 being led by CORE and CSH and Elevate Health. So we hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And thanks, everybody.